Kia ora. Hey, it's Mona here from the Humans Connecting team. Our podcast is all about soothing, supporting, challenging, and inspiring you to become a connected human. The content of our podcast is of a general nature, and consuming this content is not the same as seeking individual advice from a connection mentor, registered mental health professional, or coach. Conversations about human connection address loneliness. We destigmatize loneliness here at Humans Connecting. We do that by talking about loneliness openly. Loneliness conversations necessarily include a range of topics which at times may be difficult for us to talk about, to hear, and to sit with. If throughout our conversation this is true for you, we encourage you to please contact a mental health hotline. The link in the episode description can help you find some immediate support for many places you may be in the world. Our advice to you is this: meet yourself where you are and how you are right now. If you don't feel up to it, we'll be right here ready to be by your side when you're ready. We're glad you're here. Let's jump in.
Hello, it's Phil. Welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast. Hello, you wonderful human. Thank you so much for choosing to press play on this episode, this season finale of season 2 of the Humans Connecting podcast, no less. This is an episode where we are going to be talking about how we can create a connected workplace. And a few episodes ago, I introduced the concept of workplace loneliness. And that episode talked about how if there are 25% of humans globally are experiencing loneliness, it's kind of illogical to presume or to carry on or to operate in any kind of capacity under the assumption that that doesn't affect our workplaces and how we show up and how productive our workplaces are, how efficient we are when we're at work, and generally how we feel about work and everything really in our workplaces. So in this episode, well, we're going to continue that conversation. We're going to be joined very shortly by Dr. Hans Rocha IJzerman from the Annecy Behavioral Science Lab. And we're going to be talking about something that's really exciting that we've developed collaboratively between us here at Humans Connecting and Hans and his team, his wonderful team at ABSL. But before we do that, if you are new here, I want to say hi. I am Phil McAuliffe. I am a global loneliness thought leader, and I am the founder of Humans Connecting. I'm a speaker, I'm an author, and I'm a connection mentor. And I am absolutely, I was going to say obsessed, but I didn't want to make that seem over the top. I'm driven to understand, and I find humans deeply fascinating. And I find the experience of loneliness also really fascinating. It's an experience. There are sets of thoughts and feelings that are absolutely horrible, but it serves a purpose. Something that's so terrible serves a fantastic purpose. Because loneliness, you don't need a reminder, is not fun. It's not a great experience, but its only job is to tell us that we are missing some kind of connection that we need and deserve. But loneliness, for its noble purpose, for its life-sustaining and life-affirming purpose, well, it's misunderstood. It's avoided. It's we tend to treat it with fear, and so when inevitably we experience loneliness in our lives, we just don't know what to do. We don't know how to respond. We don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to sit with it. We don't do anything like that. And I find this really fascinating. So here at Humans Connecting, through our website, humansconnecting.org, we've got all sorts of products and services that are designed to support you no matter what you do for a living, wherever you are in the world and however you identify as a human, we've got products and services designed to help you, help your community, help your workplace become a place where humans, including you, get the connection that you need and deserve. Again, that's all through humansconnecting.org. One of our primary drivers at Humans Connecting is to have a positive social impact, because loneliness, as I've just explained, and you don't need any reminder, I'm sure, loneliness is that kind of life experience that whenever we experience it, like it's so uncomfortable and terrible and just yuck, right? And our mission, the thing that drives us to do this work at Humans Connecting, is to have that positive social impact, to completely reframe how we as humans, how you as a human sit with the thoughts and feelings of loneliness. And we are working with, we love working with other entities, companies, humans, who are also committed to making a positive social impact. And one of those companies is Annecy Behavioural Science Lab. And we're really excited because at Annecy Behavioural, like between us and Annecy Behavioural Science Lab, ABSL, we've created a program called Creating Connected Workplaces, which addresses workplace loneliness by creating what we know to be the antidote to loneliness, connection. So by addressing workplace loneliness, or to address workplace loneliness, we need to create an environment in which the humans within that environment feel connected. This episode is about that. The CEO and co-founder of ABSL, Dr. Hans Rocha IJzerman, is going to join us for a conversation about loneliness, about measuring loneliness, and talking about creating connected workplaces and his work and the work of ABSL in just a few moments. But I want to set the scene by reading you Hans's bio. And I want to say, in terms of our collaboration, I'm so excited. I'm so excited because we have partnered through Humans Connecting. We have partnered with some world leaders. And Hans won't say this, but he and his team are absolutely on the cutting edge globally of loneliness research, and that they are doing so with such conviction to doing it in the right way for the right reasons. Hans explains it so much better. I'll just leave it to him in the episode, but it makes me feel like so good to be able to know that we are doing good with other good people for the benefit of your workplace. I'm just like, it really fills me with such profound sense of gratitude and like purpose and determination to continue with the work that we do here at Humans Connecting in destigmatizing loneliness and helping you get the connection that you need and deserve. Anyway, I really want to get to this episode, but I want to introduce Hans first. So, Dr. Hans Rocha IJzerman is the co-founder and CEO of ABSL, Annecy Behavioural Science Lab. He's a leading scientific expert in social connection and loneliness research globally, with a passion to promote community and healthy attachments, having authored over 70 published scientific articles. Hans is ABSL's director and is also an associate researcher at the University of Oxford and is the scientific vice chair of the Global Initiative on Loneliness and Connection. He spearheads efforts to combat loneliness and isolation globally. Hans's work is characterized by his exceptional skills in measurement. His commitment to advancing psychological science is evident through his founding of initiatives like the In Mind magazine and co-founding the Psychological Science Accelerator. These efforts have cemented his reputation as a key player in the global psychological reform movement. Hans's expertise in social connection and measurement is frequently sought by major media outlets such as the New York Times, Huffington Post, Le Monde, Radiolab, and Psychology Today. And Hans's dedication and innovative contributions continue to make a significant positive impact, I'll add, in improving the human condition. With that kind of bio, and if you haven't met Hans, you'll meet him in just a moment, but you'll soon see why I am so excited to be working with him and the team, and all of us here at Humans Connecting are just so excited to, for the potential of what our collaboration can bring. Okay, with all of that said, I hope that you're nice and comfortable. Let's jump into the conversation with Hans, and I'll see you on the other side. Dr. Hans Rocha IJzerman, welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast.
Thank you, Phil. It's an enormous pleasure to be here.
I have to say I'm really excited to have this chat with you, and this is like I just did the intro, and the listener and the viewer like heard that this is the final episode of the second season, and I'm really excited to gift this to the world because I think what we're creating here, and I'm getting far ahead of ourselves, but I think what we're doing here is really exciting. And I can't wait for the viewer, the listener to like get as excited as we are for this service.
So, Phil, you didn't tell me that in advance that it was the last episode. So you're increasing the pressure by a lot right now.
I think you're good for it. I think you're good for it. And I think we'll leave everyone on a high. No, inter-season cliffhangers. Like some kind of TV drama, which may or may not be a good strategy. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
I was thinking that if you leave it on a cliffhanger, then people cannot wait for season 3 usually.
Oh, this is true. This is true. I'll have to like leave it with me. I'll come up with something by the outro, and create some kind of cliffhanger. But Hans, just in case someone doesn't work in loneliness and human connection circles in the world and they don't know who you are, I read your bio, like in the intro, your intro in the intro. But who are you and how did you get to be, doing this?
Those are a lot, big questions and existential questions. So my name is Hans Rocha IJzerman. I'm originally from the Netherlands. I currently live in France, and I've been an assistant and associate professor in psychology for about 15 years, until relatively recently. And most of my work has been around attachment theory, and particularly kind of biologically rooted causes of attachment theory. But I think in 2015, when I started with a theme group that included Julianne Holt-Lundstad, that many of your listeners will know, I became really interested in the core topic of social connection. And throughout the years, I've been organizing more and more meetings around the topic. And really last year, thinking and seeing the interest that is broadly emerging, I wanted to dedicate myself full time to this topic. And I jumped into creating my own company where I started working on social connection and loneliness full time. In addition to that, since 2022, I've also become the vice chair of the International Scientific Board for the Global Initiative on Loneliness and Connection. So together with Michelle Lim, she's the other vice chair, and Julianne is the chair of this board. Now, maybe also in relation to an origin story, because I think the interest in attachment and social connection, beyond that, it has been a scientific interest. It has always been a little bit of a latent interest for myself. I grew up as an atheist, as an agnost in the Netherlands,
Mm.
but you can't see this on a podcast, but I'm reasonably tall, and I played basketball in my younger days. When I was 18, I moved to the United States to play basketball in college, and I ended up, for a variety of random reasons, which is another story, at a college in southwestern Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh in Latrobe, and the college is called St. Vincent. And this was with it's a Catholic college. It's with the Benedictines, and the Benedictines have a really strong interest in community, and I really credit them for a lot of my interest in social connection. Now, maybe also not coincidentally, actually, for the American listeners, Mr. Rogers is from Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Mr. Rogers had a television show that really also, I think, inspired kind of the idea of connection with children. And he's been a very central figure in the United States in child rearing. And he had a very close connection to the college. So he died when I was there. But now they have the Mr. Rogers Center. So Tom Hanks, when he was preparing for his documentary, visited my college there as well. So the idea of community, of attachment, I think, was really central to that community. And I credit the Benedictines. They didn't convince me of becoming religious, but they did convince me of the importance of communion and reflection.
I'm sure, they on one hand celebrating, but also, on the other hand, like, thwarted, didn't get
Oh,
didn't
oh,
get it all.
Although I do have to also credit them that they always were very open to interfaith dialogue. So
Yeah.
I was there also around the time September 11th happened, and I recall the day after that in my world religious class, we were talking about Islam, and we were actually talking about also potentially the causes about why people from other countries could be angry at the United States. So I thought that was really admirable to
Yeah.
be able to get way when, of course, there was such trauma at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's many many parallels between your story and mine. I'm not I'm 5'11" or 5'10", so that's 178 centimeters. So I didn't play basketball, but I was a swimmer. But the other thing, I went to a Catholic college at the University of Melbourne, so college in the Oxford style, and so a residential college, and it was run by the Jesuits. And I went to a Marist. In the US, they say Marist, but a Marist boarding school. And I also credit them with, for me, having installing a strong sort of social justice thread. And the word now that we use is privilege. But I think, when I was growing up, it was certainly you need to contribute. If you have the skills, if you have the talents, you have this opportunity of a fantastic education. You've got amazing peers who will do great things in life. You've got all of this, like your responsibility is to vacuum it all up as much of it as you can, get involved, but then you need to make a contribution. That's your responsibility. That's your social responsibility. And I'm very grateful for that. And beyond other other kind of tenets of Catholicism that say that how I love is wrong. But that being said, I think those kind of influences where we are encouraged to make our contribution in our way. I think it's um, a great thing to, that's a terrible way of expressing it there, but what a fantastic legacy to be able to
Mhm.
carry with you in what you do, and how it feeds how you do it, not necessarily what you do.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on all points, you know, and it's kind of like this idea about social connection and the importance of social capital and taking your responsibility to contribute to the community. So I think that was very similar with the Benedictines. What was very similar also was our disagreement about the importance of adhering to certain tenets of diversity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, happy to let people have that belief, but it can't. I'm wading into dangerous theological territory here, but I'm happy making my contribution as me. But with that, listener, viewer, we just went really deep there, really like right off the bat from a who are you and what do you do and how did you get to this point? Like I think this is something that potentially is a portend of the conversation to come, Hans.
Yeah, I mean, it's also exciting because I think we have already had quite a few conversations, and it was also really because of Joe Badcock that we connected. I think I told you that, you know, Migs and I, Miguel, that I work with at my current company, we had thought about reaching out to you before already, and then Joe sent us her episode that she was on with you, and then finally we started reaching out, and you know, I think our conversation has been really exciting, and I'm really grateful also for Joe for sharing that with us, because it's been a great start, also to hopefully a long collaboration.
I think so too. And listener, Joe Badcock was on, I think, episode 4, back in the first season, and we were talking about the why we measure, and why do we sort of measure loneliness? What's the point of it? And Joe was amazing on that episode, and spoke to her own story that led her to become a world-leading expert in loneliness and social connection research, and shared very freely some of her like the highlights from her career. But as a result of that, that's how Hans and I got to know each other. And from my perspective, there's a couple of things here. So Hans did mention in his intro that he's Dutch. And I do have this linguistic envy with him. Like I've heard him just slip effortlessly from English into French. And but one of the things that I just think is really funny and makes kind of sealed the deal after our first call, in terms of taking steps to sort of have a formal collaboration, was listener and viewer Hans corrects my English, and
Just on 2 words.
I'm not going to say them because I'm a bit embarrassed now.
But you're inviting it in.
That's
I wasn't
very
gonna I
true.
wasn't gonna go there. I wasn't gonna go there, Phil.
I know. I just like, I want the I'm trying to court the viewer and the listener to my side of this. But yes, no, the words are data, and which I still can't say now without like having your voice in my head. Data. Like, and the words that in Joe's episode that I still can't say without clapping out. And those other words I'm going to throw to you, Hans.
Quantitative and qualitative.
So I can't say the quality one. I can't. I really just have to pause. So, the origin story, really, I think the fun version of this origin story is that I needed someone, and the team here at Humans Connecting, we needed someone who could actually say those words properly for us.
So I fulfilled my role. This is the end of the episode. Bye, Phil.
And I really just need you to clap it out, and I'm just going to like stuff it up within a few moments afterwards as well. So I'm just going to say like clock it up to one of the many things that make me such a compelling and amazing human is that I can't say some words properly. So yeah. So Hans, I'm really keen to explore and explain like the nature of our collaboration in terms of creating connected workplaces. So in the introduction, I said that we know that connection is the antidote to loneliness. So when we're talking about workplace loneliness, like we can flip it to create connected workplaces that address and treat, for want of a better term, loneliness in a particular organization, like in individual organizations. But what what is it about the collaboration that's got you most interested? That's a terrible, most excited, or what's the thing that you're really keen to share with the audience?
It's a very good question, and I have to think deeply about this one. But maybe we go back to also your episode with Joe, because I think that's where the collaboration started. You know, if I think about the episode that Joe shared, and I have a lot of respect for Joe, and I think at least, I hope she agrees that we share very similar views. So I think Joe is very deeply committed to the work of practitioners, and she's also committed to diversity. So thinking about work from the global south, for example, but diversity in all kinds of ways, because social connection takes many different forms. But what Joe also has is a healthy skepticism about the current strength of the evidence behind some interventions. She questions, similarly like us, how current measurement tools do their work, particularly for broader population and particularly capturing diversity. And that's where I think, we share the skepticism. We also share the commitment to using science to improve interventions that you and I first connected. So I really deeply admire the stories that you share about social connection, your past experiences, what you went through in your life, and also how you're reflecting about these kind of experiences, how you share your story, your personal story so openly, because I think this is really important to raising awareness, to destigmatizing, to starting the conversation, to opening the story that scientists typically cannot do nearly as well as you can. So I think your expertise with the way that you bring these stories, but also your expertise within the workplace, I think combined with our scientific approach, for me really builds a strong foundation for building better programs, because that combination, what I think, the creating connected workplace really is a blend of the shared expertise. First, we raise awareness. We bring powerful stories about people that have experienced loneliness, how it has impacted them personally in terms of their well-being, also for you, how it has impacted you professionally. And I think that way we can also communicate that we take these individual differences seriously, because different stories, there are different causes, there are different solutions, and that allows us to tailor the measurement to individual organizations. And then subsequently, when we have the data, sorry, I did that intentionally, Phil. When we have the data, we
Wasn't
can then,
subtle, Hans.
I know. But then we can really
Sorry.
tailor interventions to different workplaces, because if you then have different kind of measurements for different organizations, you can also see where potential problems are, and not only where the potential problems are, but how it impacts that individual workplace differently than another workplace. So in terms of maybe productivity, but for others' well-being, it really depends on the workplace and how it could impact them. And then together we can work with the organization to improve the inner workings and hopefully creating more meaning for people in their work.
Yeah, I think thank you for that, and I think there's a few things in there to kind of come back to and sit with for a moment. But I think I absolutely agree. I kind of summarize the collaboration through creating connected workplaces as blending story and science.
Mhm.
And there's the kind of art science, which is more important, kind of philosophical discussion. But for us here at Humans Connecting, we know that there are a lot of people around the world who are doing fantastic things, studying loneliness, studying social isolation, disconnection, connection, what makes us connect, social health, all of these kind of concepts relating to how humans do connection. But one of the things that I noticed and keep on noticing time and time and time again is that this is me being a language nerd here, but so forgive the grammar lesson. But loneliness conversations stay in the third person. They stay in loneliness is, it is about this, and the concept of loneliness is sliced and diced and analyzed lots of different ways, which can be very helpful. But I feel really strongly that there's a missing link between the concept of loneliness and how it's experienced within the human. So in the first person. And that's where the power of story comes in. And as you say there, Hans, but for us, it's creating the space where it's okay to talk about loneliness, where the ground doesn't open up and swallow us whole. We don't get struck by lightning. And actually, talking about loneliness gives permission for us to begin to sit with the concept, with the experience, with the thoughts, with the feelings within ourselves. And yep, it's not fun. It's uncomfortable at times. There might be some tears. There might be some really horrible things that come up that have been there for a very long time. But the connection that we need is through that. And we don't do that. We don't sit in the discomfort. We don't, shed the tears. We don't feel uncomfortable. We don't do that alone. That's completely missing the point. Doing it alone misses the point. So what we do is create that safe space to begin through all of our products and services, but particularly here at within creating connected workplaces in workplaces, and we'll get onto that in a moment. Kind of that the sort of sensitivities in workplaces about something like this. But I simply want to say, like that mix of story and science, I really reckon is so powerful. Sounding very Australian there, I really reckon that. But also Hans and the whole team at ABSL, like listener, viewer, they are the world leaders. They won't say that. They won't say that. And Hans is probably like going, can you edit that out? And he's going to be a bit uncomfortable, but
We talked about tall poppy culture in the Netherlands and Australia, Phil.
Yeah. Well, I'm placing some Osmocote and other like fertilizer and growing some tall poppies here. Because this is like and I like really just want to underline your point there too, Hans, about how just like individuals, workplaces, organizations are unique. And while loneliness is loneliness, there are many commonalities. The differences can matter, like, and really do matter. So while loneliness is a universal experience, it shows up for lots of different reasons in lots of different ways in individuals, and it's the same in organizations. So what Hans, you were saying in terms of like the data is that actually really matters, because what then we're doing is having bespoke responses,
Mm-hmm.
bespoke and surgical
Yeah.
responses, rather than kind of like throwing everything at it and seeing what sticks. It's surgical. It's really targeted, um, and supported by amazing people who do amazing things scientifically, and then us here at Humans Connecting who do amazing things by sharing stories, and creating that, um,
And helping
reducing.
to craft and helping to craft the interventions importantly, because I think that's an important conversion from the data that we gather.
Yeah, from the third person into the first person again, and stuff. So I really just wanted to, at the sense of, at the risk of laboring the point. I'm sorry if I've just labored the point, but I so like I'm really excited by that, the power there, like something that's for the mind and something that's for the heart and soul, which then speaks to the whole human, speaks to the whole organization, which I think is something that's really exciting, for us. Um, yeah. Have I
There
labored the
were
point there enough?
more than, and there were many thoughts that went through my mind when you were talking as well. Maybe also this goes back to Joe and her and the podcast about the importance of measurement. When I'm thinking about interventions and the importance of measurements, so when you get up and you decide what clothes to wear, without getting into all personal stuff, but what is one of the first things you do?
Well, is this easy to move in?
Well, I'm mostly thinking because you mentioned this many times actually about
Mhm.
winter and summer. Uh, so what kind of
Oh, yeah.
what drives your decision to look
Well,
at
yeah,
the weather,
the temperature, the
the
temperature.
temperature?
Yeah,
So temperature has a long history about how we got it, very precise in terms of measurements. And then we're able to make all kinds of models about it. And we make decisions every day about those measurements that they do very precisely. And then I think when I go back about thinking about social connection, it's something that we haven't nearly dedicated as much time as measuring temperature, but we're getting a lot better at it. I think it's almost like the temperature within a company where you want to develop really accurate measurements to simply improve from day to day how people are doing within the company. And I think you can think it very similarly as what temperature is in terms of your measurement in order to improve the state of the company. The other thing that I was thinking about, I think your really powerful point also about third person to first person and scientists, because I'm not sure that, I've gone to conferences and talked about attachment theory and talked about social connection. I don't think I've ever heard, except for, some personal friends maybe that I've had in the academy, scientists talk about their experience of loneliness, their own experience of loneliness. And it's also a bit remarkable because my better half, she's a therapist, and I also did some basic training in relationship therapy. And one of the first things that you do when you're a therapist, that you reflect on your own attachment experiences, so that you're better able to understand the clients that you see. And of course, it's something that we talk about relatively frequently as well when she sees clients and about our own attachment experiences. So in a way, it's almost surprising that we as scientists don't, even at conferences, don't do this more frequently. I mean, I understand because oftentimes people want to be detached from
yeah,
the topic in order to be able to analyze well, but particularly in disciplines where they do more qualitative work, um, oftentimes you have a positionality statement. So you indicate how you feel about a specific topic in order to kind of highlight your own biases. And I do think there's a lot of value in us, reflecting on our own experiences with loneliness and social connection in order to better understand these as well.
yeah, yeah. I think for me it is so powerful. It's a frequent call to action. If I'm speaking to a crowd, an audience with scientists, in it, or mental health practitioners, it's you know, speak about it in the first person as well, which it's easy to say, but it's deeply uncomfortable to do. And you know, when it comes to something like loneliness and social disconnection, it's tough. It's
Mhm.
really tough to sit in the emotion, in the experience repeatedly as part of your work. So I can understand why there is that, you know, detachment, but detachment feels to me a synonym of disconnection.
Mhm.
So, you know, the irony of working on loneliness, working on social connection or social disconnection, like the tough, uncomfortable side of things. Um, a common feature is disconnection with the emotion of it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I could completely understand why. I so understand why. And in many aspects, I'm a bit envious of being able to put that distance in there because there's many days when I'm like, no, I can't do this today. I can't do this today. I can't do loneliness today. I need to go and like not.
Yeah. Although, it goes back to some of the points that you discussed as well, and, related to the topic of the day, workplaces.
Yeah.
I don't think it's very common to show vulnerability for people that work within the academy. So, I think that's an important part of it, why people don't discuss it.
Yeah. And I think there's something there like on vulnerability, authenticity, and the mismatch there. And I want to explore it just after this quick break.
Hi, it's Nika from the ABSL team. We all know how wonderful it is to work in places with good leaders. Good leaders in workplaces know that fostering a connected workplace is more than just organizing events or sending out emails. It's about creating an environment where every team member feels seen and valued, where every team member feels like they are a part of the team, that they belong. But it can be particularly challenging to create a connected workplace in larger organizations spread across multiple locations. And we're here to help. Our Creating Connected Workplaces service, delivered by Phil McAuliffe of Humans Connecting and Dr. Hans Rocha IJzerman of Annecy Behavioral Science Lab, gives leaders throughout your organization the tools they need to succeed. Our advanced measurement methods offer unparalleled accuracy. We help you get the right information and metrics you need to assess the level of social connection within your team. We also inspire your leaders to communicate in the most effective ways with their teams, even with implementing science backed strategies that enhance social connections. When you're ready to empower your leaders in your workplace and make your organization flourish and thrive, tap the Creating Connected Workplaces link in the show notes and book your initial call with Phil and Hans. And let's create your connected workplace together.
Welcome back. I did lead into the break there by saying that, you know, talking about accountability, authenticity, and vulnerability. But during the break, Hans reminded me that we'd kind of skipped over something, and it was kind of important. It was a bit of a scene setter as well. So, with your indulgence, viewer, listener, Hans, can like you mentioned in your intro that, you know, with Miguel, you created your company, but we kind of skated over the top of your company. The viewer on YouTube can see the background there in your screen, but I don't see Behavioral Science Lab. What's it about?
Yeah, and I think the reason why it's important to mention is because really it's a big team effort. So
Mm,
NC Behavioral Science Lab, or we use the shorthand ABSL. So currently we have four core staff members. So I mentioned Miguel Silan, but we're also working with Yassine Bouatroup and Nika Sireluas and myself. We also currently work with six research contractors. So we not infrequently work with different research contractors. These then, they typically provide services that we don't have in-house. So these research contractors live and work in the Philippines, India, Zimbabwe, Morocco, and Brazil. So we began advancing our mission only last year. Like I mentioned before, I really started immersing myself full-time in social connection of last year. And I think we have a clear purpose. So our purpose is to enhance the lives of as many people as possible. So we, and I think you, Phil, believe that fostering stronger social connection is central to this mission. So we believe that to be essential to a fulfilling life. So we kind of refer to it indirectly, but our approach is really strongly grounded in science and particularly accurate measurements. And we think that plays a critical role in understanding how people feel about their social network. But of course, good measurement, it doesn't happen by accident. It really requires intentional effort and thoughtful design, which admittedly, we in psychology haven't always been good about. So that's something we really care deeply about. Mm-hmm. And I keep referring back to Joe's episode, but I think, for the reasons why, I think see Joe's episode.
Yes.
But for us, it also means that we try to include people from around the world in this enterprise and different people in different countries. And we also do careful reviews of what measurement scientists have done and try to consolidate these measurements. So as a company now, we work with global leaders like the World Health Organization, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, we're typically better known as OECD, many leading universities. So I also am affiliated now with Oxford, and we also work with innovative tech companies and startups really to make this vision a reality. And what is also important to us, I kind of referred to it already. So social isolation and loneliness can really have different forms for different people. And so for us, we're really committed to understanding the broad range of experiences. So for the work that we do, but also within the company, a key pillar of our mission is really an unwavering commitment to inclusion and diversity. So for us, it's important that we embrace people from all walks of life. So that includes people from different religious beliefs, sexual orientation, gender, body type, appearance, because a diverse team is not just a goal, but we think it's really a necessity for driving meaningful change. And so we also want to create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected. Maybe also, if I may make a tangential mention, so we're currently still looking for longer term staffers. So people interested in psychometrics and doing good science, they should get in touch with us.
There will be a link in the show notes if this is calling you, viewer, listener. Thank you, Hans. One of the things there, and we've talked about this previously, but one of the things that I'm excited about really from our perspective here at Humans Connecting is that the current measures of loneliness aren't great. And it's well known that they're not great. And again, referring to Joe's episode, we talked about how not great they are. And the way that I kind of describe them in my lay terms is that it was done by some California surfer dudes in the 90s. And the language reflects California surfer dude expressions from the 90s, not overtly, but the language isn't accessible. And what Hans and his team are describing there what Hans is describing that he and the team are doing is really trying to think what's the right word that I'm trying to think there, Hans, but like fundamentally rethinking how loneliness and social isolation, but particularly loneliness, is measured. And so the contractors that you mentioned there, who are in Zimbabwe, Morocco, the Philippines, and India, and Brazil, like those countries have been chosen specifically because you heard Hans mention the global South, and also like a huge chunk of the world's population live in those countries, and so this is referencing a comment that an academic at RMIT University in Melbourne said in an article in Science magazine. So hi Nikez, if you're listening. But currently we're at like real risk at solving loneliness for white people in the developed world. And so the work, for the reasons that you've mentioned there, Hans, like valuing, like not just saying that you value it, but actually living the valuing of diversity, is this is the thing that is going to be, well, I feel, revolutionize how we assess loneliness, and referencing just before the break, how we take the temperature, how we measure the temperature within ourselves, within within our family units, within our communities, within countries, within organizations, and things. This is really exciting. We will be talking more about it on the podcast as after, like, as the work's being done and the research and the findings are ready. But this is so exciting. This is so exciting, and it's ABSL who are leading it. Hans won't say that, but I'm saying that. It's fantastic. It's so exciting. I'm all about nerding out. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Phil. I mean, similarly, we also are excited. So we just had a conversation with one of the contractors yesterday. You know, we're waiting for the IRB approval. So IRB meaning ethical approval to start the studies. And we can't wait. Like, I would love to do these interviews myself and talking to the people about what social connection means for them. And maybe also to get back to it. So, of course, these measurements have been developed for a very small subset of the population. It's possible that they work for other people, but we have to kind of better understand if it does or not. Like, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, alongside of it, so we do systematic reviews of people elsewhere in the world. We do try to merge kind of the different types of approaches. So it's not just that we only focus on the global south, but of course they've been underrepresented in a lot of psychology research. But we then do try to come up with better measurements across larger swaths of the population. You know, of course, there are limited things we can do. So, for example, the World Health Organization is doing a lot more because they have a lot bigger reach. That is basically subsequent work from where we take off. But, you know, a lot of the preparatory work. But, you know, I do think that in about 5 years, we'll be so much better equipped at measurement. Not only because we are better able to understand different types of people, but I also suspect that we'll be able to adapt measurement to different situations more automatically.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really exciting. And I can't wait to weave it into the work that we do here at Humans Connecting, you know, likely hot off the press as well, which is really exciting. Thank you for that, Hans, and shout out to the team at ABSL. It is just like our conversations that we have between our teams are just like they're fantastic. They're awesome. And coming back to where we were just before the break, we're talking about like authenticity, vulnerability, and certainly in, like, you know, if you read the Harvard Business Review, if read over the past few years any kind of like leadership or management literature, words like, you know, you need to be like cultivate a space where people could be authentic, and you need to be vulnerable, and things like that. These words, as in so many things when it comes to like concepts, when it comes to leadership and management, kind of become buzzwords. I could say another word there that would out me as an Australian, but these are managerial buzzwords, and, you know, like, let's be honest, we have probably all played buzzword bingo, and where you tick off these words when someone says something, and you know, there's the common, you know, use words of the day. It is really important, though, that we are in places and spaces where we do feel where we feel seen and where we feel heard. And to feel seen and to feel heard, we need to actually be vulnerable. But vulnerability is really scary. But where we don't feel seen and where we don't feel heard, simply where we don't feel seen and where we don't feel heard, we don't feel that we belong. And if we don't feel that we belong, the thoughts and feelings of loneliness are pretty close behind. Generally speaking, very generally speaking there. So in saying that, in leading to the next question there, Hans, why should businesses care? Why should organizations care about workplace loneliness or loneliness in their workplace? Why should organizations care about the state of connection, human connection within the humans in the organization?
Yeah, so I think this is a really important question, and there's a relatively short answer to it, I think. So first and foremost, loneliness and social isolation are significantly related to health, well-being, and importantly for the workplace productivity. So, I was also recently reading, you referred to Harvard Business Review. I think one of the leading voices on this topic is the US Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. He also wrote a very thoughtful piece on it in the Harvard Business Review, and he pointed out that many employees and even also CEOs often report feeling lonely. And we know that lonely workers, they say they feel less productive, they're more likely to miss work, they're far more likely to experience stress, and they're more likely to leave their jobs. So these are real tangible costs for companies when it comes to loneliness. And so, I'm also now thinking about building my own company. And for me, I really believe that that employees are a company's most valuable asset. So, and of course, any important assets, they need to be nurtured to really thrive. This may require so in the beginning, if you're focused on the short term, this will require some expenses. This will require cost. But if you think about it from a return on investment, the long-term return on an investment, I think, can be substantial. Because if you retain knowledge, if you retain and build expertise, if you train your employees, you want to make sure that they stick with you. And I think supporting your employees also when they're in more difficult times is far more cost effective in the long run than constantly having to replace and retrain staff. If you think about it, if you want to lead a workplace, and you can't, like, I don't know, Phil, when you think about, your past work experiences, but when you're recruiting people, it's a lot of work. You have to prepare job ads, you have to think about what kind of person you want to recruit. Typically, what we also do, we try to standardize our interviews. So we have the same type of question for every employee. We make scoring metrics. So it's a lot of work to recruit people.
Yeah.
It's a big cost. And not only that, but the person that left will have a lot of expertise about the workplace with them that they'll take with them when they leave. So I think there's a big cost for employees leaving. So it requires a little bit upfront investment, and it's a little bit more continuous than recruiting people. So it may not feel like it's a bigger cost to recruit people, but I think if you would calculate, it would be a bigger cost. So
Yeah.
nurturing, making sure they thrive. Of course, there's a moral argument to be made, but I think that there's also very much a self-interested argument to be made for companies. Of course, when I work with other people, I want to make sure that they're happy. It's an important part of the job because we don't just only don't only live to work. And it's your work is an important, meaningful part of who you are.
Work can be a place where we find purpose.
Yeah.
And where we find purpose, and we're living our purpose. That sounds very kind of esoteric and coachy potentially, but where we live our purpose, like, look out. Like we can move mountains, to quote Dr. Seuss there, but it really is, yeah, like I think we all know, like viewer, listener, like we all know like how great it feels to do something that we know matters. And simply, humans thrive when they feel seen and feel heard. Like we love it. We love it when we feel seen and feel heard as the humans that we are, not with any conditions on it, or it might feel good if there are conditions on it, but we can't live up to the conditions forever. But when we feel seen and when we feel heard and valued for that, oh, like look out. It's amazing. It's amazing what we do. But one of the things, Hans, thank you for providing that simple answer, both because it's really clear, and then secondly, it's great for editing purposes, for recording on for editing for social media. But here in Australia, at least, since sort of going back to business as usual post-pandemic, the conversation has been, how do we increase productivity? How do we increase productivity without increasing salaries? Because if we increase worker salaries, then that feeds inflation. And I don't want to get all macroeconomic on people. Like I'm not I'm not an economist. A postgrad in public policy, but an undergrad and honours degree in international relations. But more money from salaries. I mean, everyone wants more salaries. Feeds inflation, unfortunately. And what that then means is, like, the conversation is, how do we increase productivity without paying people more? And what really I find myself like, maybe a specific cultural reference here, but I find myself like Grandpa Simpson in The Simpsons, like when the news is on and I'm yelling at the TV. And the Australian Treasurer is on and saying, we need to improve productivity, and cost per output goes down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just once, I would really love the economists to go, you know what? How humans feel matters, because it does. It does. How humans feel in like places and spaces, wherever they are, including workplaces, matters. It really matters, but it hasn't yet factored into it. So if you are in an organization, if you are like, a CEO, if you're an employee, and you're tearing your hair out how to actually, increase productivity, increase efficiency, lessen staff turnover, increase morale, like the answer is simple. The answer is not easy, potentially, but the answer is simple. Focus on human connection. And I really do feel that this is the cutting edge. And generally, as employers, as employees, we want to do the best that we can with what we've got. But when there's never enough time, when there's never enough people, when there's never enough money, it can be really hard to actually prioritize this in a really meaningful way. This can be a way forward to help people thrive and flourish, because that's good for business. That's good for the organization. That's good for its clients. That's good for no one loses. No one loses when there's a focus on human connection. Yeah.
So Phil, when you started talking at the beginning of this, I already thought like, this is going to turn into money talks from The Economist, but you started referencing The Economist yourself. Of course, you know that I listen to The Economist religiously, so I really like their podcast. But maybe also to think about it from a different perspective. So my good friend Jim Cohn, so he's a social neuroscientist at the University of Virginia. He has done these really cool studies where he has people come into the scanner, they hold each other's hand, and then they get an anticipation to an electric shock. Anticipation to an electric shock is worse than the actual shock itself because it's not that bad, something that passed ethical review. So listeners, it's not a huge shock, it's just this tiny shock. So the anticipation is worse than the actual shock itself. Now, when when they get the shock, typically what happens is that areas in your brain, to state it simply, light up that are associated with stress. What Jim thought originally is that if people would hold their hand, typically you become less stressed. So that probably means that you do more work, because when you experience less stress, people probably downregulate their stress. But what he saw was not areas that are related to doing more work lighted up, but instead just areas that were related to stress were lighting up less. So that means that people were doing less work. His interpretation from this, what he calls a social baseline, is that when people are with other people and they feel supported, they tend to do less work. So it's still a very economical story. It's still about the amount of expenses that you have versus your income, but basically now you have less expenses. So that's kind of what he thinks about in terms of an economic approach to human behavior. And it's also generally true if you look at other animals. So when animals are confronted with stress, but they're in a group, it's metabolically less taxing. When animals are in a group, they have to regulate temperature, which is super expensive metabolically. It costs less effort. So overall, coming back to kind of the workplace, I took a big tangent theoretically, but you can think about this economically as well. If people feel supported in the workplace, overall, for people themselves, for each individual person, it will be less taxing economically. So thinking about it from an economic perspective, if you feel supported, for everybody, it is less costly, and you can do more if you go back to your productivity argument, simply because you spend less time regulating, and you can do more things doing something else. Maybe to go back to the initial argument, of course, that's never an argument to pay more salary. So I do still think it's good to think about fair salary compensation for workplaces, but that's an entirely different argument, maybe for the economists sometimes.
I think in the end, I just find it just so fascinating how wonderfully complex humans are, but also like how simple we are, and how we can want to overcomplicate the like response to a vexing problem. But I think, your example there, like knowing how humans respond to stress, means that could be accounted for, and what's the word that like adapted, responded to in an individual organization, based on their stresses and things. Which brings me to the next question, Hans. One of the things that we hear a lot is, particularly in my former workplace, is like, we're all about creating this space where people can be themselves, but as soon as people become people and occupy the space, there's a line between where the organization's responsibilities and personal responsibility begins, and the line is often, "Oh, that's not for us to meddle. That's an individual." So in a business setting, like, where do you feel or is there anything in the data yet? Where's the line between personal issues and organizational responsibility when it comes to loneliness, social disconnection?
Yeah, of course, that line also shifts based on how hospitable or hostile the workplace is, in terms of how much involved they can be. But I do think it's a crucial question, and I wouldn't say that we have the data on this yet, but it is important to finding the right balance. So of course, as an organization, you don't want to cross boundaries and intrude into your employees' personal lives. I think that's a key starting point. But at the same time, it's also important to recognize when personal struggles are affecting work, and to respond with compassion. So you can monitor people when they are in the workplace and how they're doing, and sometimes also talking to them about it. So I think you can provide support, When you see that employees are struggling, maybe by adjusting expectations at work, offering extra time off when needed, when people are struggling and you can see that they need some extra time to recover, or maybe providing access to resources. So you as a company don't have to talk about their personal lives if that's not, a given in the workplace, but you can provide the resources for them to talk to other people outside of the workplace. And this way, I think it can create an environment that values well-being of employees. And again, going back to the cost argument. So from a business perspective, offering support during tough times, it's not just about being kind. It is really a strategic investment. When you're able to show employees that you care, and not just show, but actually really care, and give them the flexibility that they need, I think you're far more likely to see a return in the form of higher engagement, loyalty, productivity, once your employees have worked through challenges. So if they're confronted with a difficult life situation, offer them the support they need, they will come back more refreshed and more engaged because, I mean, it's not just about investment, but if you care about people, they'll repay with gratitude. So like I also mentioned before, so we're also trying to think about this for our own organization, about how to address this for our own employees. So for us, we believe that by creating policies that help employees through difficult periods, we won't only foster a healthy workplace, but also strengthen our organization in the long run. When they feel supported, they're more invested and it benefits everyone, the employee, the organization. And sometimes to go back to The Economist, so there was also a good podcast on Costco. So Costco is a US grocery store that has its membership. So they try to keep their actual profit margin relatively limited. But what the key is that their turnover after the first year is only about 10%. So that's an organization I want to learn about. And that's an organization I also want to mirror in my own organization to make sure that people really want to stay there after their first, like, of course, the first year, sometimes it's trying out, maybe it's a match, maybe it's a mismatch. But after 1 year, you know whether it's a match or not. And you want to retain people because, again, they're your capital. But to go back to the balance between personal issues and organizational responsibility, I don't think it's necessary to intrude in their lives. You can see how they are in the workplace and you can see how connected they feel in general when they're at the workplace, how stressed they feel, and with that, offering them support if it's necessary.
I think critical in that is the point of interaction in an organization. And generally, depending on the size and scale of the organization, it's not like the HR person who is having every single conversation with every single employee, but it's the managers, it's the leaders who are, sometimes they're like middle management, sometimes more senior management, having these conversations. And if they're experiencing loneliness themselves, it's harder to show up in support of others who come to you with an issue, like a personal issue, loneliness or otherwise, but it's hard to show up for other people when you're under like duress yourself. And there's quite possibly a thought or a thought that is vocalized is like, oh, we just need to get the work done. Like, you can have your your time after the work gets done. And the can gets kicked down the road. But I think critically, it's not just the employees. Well, it's employees at all levels who can show. It's one thing, and this goes to like sometimes the difficulty of talking about loneliness is that it's difficult to talk about it, but also it's difficult to listen to it. Because the listening to it can hold up an uncomfortable mirror to ourselves where we're compelled, whether we're ready or not, to assess the quality and quantity potentially, but quality certainly of our own connections. And someone saying, I'm experiencing loneliness, can, if you're not ready, if you're not open to that conversation, can be very uncomfortable for the person receiving it. If not in that conversation, then afterwards. So I think one of the ways that it matters is that in order to talk about it, we also need to hear it. We also need to listen to it without pity, without fixing it, without leaping to the conclusion that the person experiencing a totally normal human experience that everybody is meant to experience is somehow broken, is not made of the right stuff, can't hack it, needs to be put out to, pasture or moved on or whatever it is. So the work can continue. I think this is a multi-tiered response. So yeah, people can talk about it more comfortably, and listen to it more comfortably as well.
Maybe this is also a good time to plug our conversation for you this morning and for me last night with Carson Kelly and Tim Eddington, because of course, how do you make sure that it's sustained? But they had this fascinating idea of a chief flourishing officer.
Yes.
That can potentially help implement many of these policies. So I'm really curious about where that goes, because I think it's a really tantalizing, like really exciting idea.
I think so too. And as I said to you just before we press recording, that CFO, Chief Flourishing Officer, seems like a whole lot more fun. I'm sorry to the accountants and chief financial officers listening, but that CFO seems exciting to me personally. But also, so yes, listener, viewer, recording this late afternoon my time and early morning for Hans, but at 4 a.m. this morning for me, it was this really interesting conversation. So if I kind of lose my train of thought halfway through a sentence, I'm human, and this is what happens when I'm a bit tired. So just keeping in mind the time here, Hans. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting in like you and I put a call out to our teams, so in Humans Connecting and in ABSL, about, is there an experience of workplace loneliness or loneliness in a workplace that they can share with us? And we had a couple of responses. And one of I think the way that you described it just before, I think can really neatly summarize it. And when people are having a human experience, it's that ability or inability to meet them where they are and how they are that can really help someone come back, like reconnect with themselves, feel reconnected with the world around them. And sometimes when, depending on the workplace, it can be a workplace that, you're not like, you essentially, you need to leave you at the door and be employee or worker you when you walk in, and leave, personal stuff outside. Of course, it doesn't work that way. What came up for you in in that sort of workplace loneliness experience?
Yeah, so I think I need a sip of water before I start talking about it. I think it's difficult to think back about this, but like you also oftentimes say, loneliness is an everyday experience. It happens to everyone, so it's important to talk about it. Maybe also first to go back, I think it's important when we were talking about academics not sharing their experiences. In order to reconnect, I think it's important to talk about it. We oftentimes think about it as a biological drive. So we need to recognize it for ourselves. So that's starting my intro to start a difficult story. So this one happened about a decade ago. And for me, it's still a little bit painful. I think if when we were talking about it, I was writing it down, and it's still a bit painful to relive. But I think sharing these stories can help yourself, but also others feel less alone in their struggle. At the time, I was still living in the Netherlands, and I was working as an assistant professor in psychology. And maybe before going to the rest, there will necessarily be people that recognize themselves in the story. So apologies for 99% of the people that will be in this story, not everybody. But it's necessarily so. If you want to talk about it afterwards, feel free to reach out. During this period, I think everything looked great on paper, at least in the beginning. I was in a good job doing work that I was passionate about, but under the surface, I think things were falling apart. I was working really absurd hours, oftentimes. So I still lived far away from work. Sometimes I worked close to 60 hours a week, leaving home at 7 a.m., spending 2 hours commuting, working all day, doing more work in the evenings and on Sundays. And I think it was relentless. It also left little time for anything else, meaning also meaningful connections outside the workplace. It was also right after a scandal hit our field. A very prominent researcher had been caught fabricating data. So within the workplace itself, I think trust in the profession was really shaken. And I think the atmosphere, in many ways, even though many good people in the workplace, but it was just volatile, because if your trust is shaken, atmosphere can be a little bit more difficult. I think everyone was on edge, trying to protect themselves in a field that suddenly felt hostile. But for me, at the same time, in my personal life, there were also a lot of things going on. I was back then in a relationship that in hindsight was an experiment for both of us. We both came into it after difficult breakups. Probably weren't a good match. I think she was a very good person, but, just didn't work. Her parents couldn't stand me. I think it was the tip of the iceberg. We were both going through the motions, trying to make something work that just wasn't meant to be. And around the same time, actually, basically the same time, one of my best friends who was here this weekend, I'd known him right now. I probably know him for about 17, 20 years. He would also later be my best man at my wedding. He went through something really, really difficult. His wife back then was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Sorry, this always makes me tear up. But after a brief fight, she passed away. And he had a one-year-old son back then. And of course, it tore me apart. For him, it was even more difficult. But I don't think it was I didn't realize how much it was affecting me too. You try to be strong. You think you can handle it, but as you can see, you're barely holding it together. Luckily now, by the way, he got remarried because I lived there, and he got married to a friend of mine who lived close by. He got to know right after that period. But when my own relationship ended, it wasn't only emotional, it was also practical. So I was living with her at the time, as I had rented out my place. We broke up. I had nowhere to go because my own place was rented out. Went back to my parents, who I of course love, but it's not my own place. You don't have your own place attachment. A very kind colleague actually lent me her house because she was abroad. But personally, I wasn't in a good place. So I tried to ignore what I was going through. I was burying myself in work, perhaps going out more than I should have, rejecting connection. Certain dating app seemed to, but did not help in finding connection. I think I was, hurt at that time, and I kept people at arm's length because letting people in was too risky. So I did have a lot of good colleagues, I think, at the time, but of course, there wasn't necessarily a good way to deal with it. Now, at the same time, I think there was a role for the organization, because while I was at work, there's on one end, the organization can help, but that didn't happen. But I think the organization also actively played a role to hurt, because I did have a superior that was back at that time that was manipulative and exploitative, I think. And the stress of also meeting the expectation means that, for me, meant that things were kind of falling apart further. This specific person was also removed 8 years later due to mismanagement. But I think, a lot of other people were affected during that time. So many people that I really value as colleagues have left that workplace. because of that situation. And they could have intervened, I think, much earlier. And of course, so back then, if the organization had been more aware in that case, so they don't necessarily have to intervene in my life, but if they had recognized the sign that I was struggling, I think things that may have been different. Maybe I would have even still worked there. You know, providing support, pointing to resources, giving me some time to breathe and some time off. But I think during that time, you know, I felt isolated, no one to turn to. And so, you know, I do think that in that case, you know, I was in a very difficult case because I had many risk factors. Somebody who I loved died, didn't have a house, was out of a relationship. So it's not even a very subtle, like array of risk factors.
Yeah.
I think at that time, giving someone time off, offering support probably would have helped. Of course, you know, I think I also had a role to play. I probably should have done things differently. Probably should have sought therapy at the time, but you know, I can admit that I'm stubborn and I was too proud. And I thought I didn't need help, but I did. You know, so there were different things that I could have done. But at a certain point, people are also get too overwhelmed, particularly if you're working 60 hours a week. I think you don't have the time and space to reflect upon what's going on. So on the one end, you know, I think a healthier workplace would have helped me to reflect, but also a healthier workplace probably could have offered me the resources to deal with these situations. Maybe I've also, if I can add to that still, for me in hindsight, you know, it's clear that the organization missed an opportunity. Because on paper, you know, I think thinking back about the capital within the company, you know, I was doing pretty well. I was publishing articles, I won teaching awards, I was getting grants, so many of the metrics that a university would care about. And I do believe that then you lose capital by the employee leaving because you need to recruit another person, but at the same time you lose the expertise within the company. If there would have been simple check-ins, time off, guidance to mental health resources, it would have been much cheaper, I think, in the end for them. So personally, of course, it's difficult to go back to the tall poppy culture to tout your own horn. But, you know, I do like to believe that my return on investment was pretty good. And if they would have invested, it would have been cheaper for them in the end. I don't know if we should also reflect about the positive points during that time already. You know, it's a big story to tell. And you know, beyond my better half, I don't think I've shared it with that many people.
Yeah.
But, you know, some of the bright spots also. So I did have colleagues that showed kindness, you know, the one that lent me her home, another older professor that I'm still friends with now that helped me get back on track professionally, that has been super helpful, that I really consider a close friend. Formed new friendships during that period, the place where I lived. And I do think also the difficult time led me to where I am now, you know, I'm in a different phase. I'm now with a partner who I love dearly, 2 kids that mean the world to me. Right now, the work that I do, I love. It gives me purpose and fulfillment. But, you know, it's probably also through those dark times that made me who I am now. So, but it did get me here. So, you know, but maybe also to get back to where I started, it is something that we all go through. And by opening up, you know, probably we can create spaces to share these experiences with others and help each other move forward. You know, I talk about it now with my wife as well. She actually read this story that I penned down yesterday. So she was also moved last night before we went to bed.
Thank you. Thank you. It is always a privilege and an honor to hear someone's experience of life, but in this instance, experience of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And almost like the cascading or the effect of like cascading events that led you to experience dark nights, like not one night, but dark nights of the soul. And on this side of the experience, it is easier to see the thread that links now to back then.
Yeah.
But in the midst of that experience, like, it's hard to see out of the hole.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's important to note, that the way it's ended up and the story continues, it's a pretty awesome chapters between like now and then.
Yeah, for sure.
But on your hero's journey through life, like, that was some dark times where I'm going to say it didn't feel like there was anywhere safe.
Yeah. And you and I have also talked about it, because oftentimes when people talk about social connection, we talked about it for you this morning. People just think they need to get out there. But that's not the case. When all these things happen, particularly at once, relationship that doesn't work that doesn't feel safe, you feel like you can't trust people. And you really need to recalibrate. You probably also need to find different places to interact with. But at the same time, you need to recalibrate who you are. So you really need to do careful work on that. So it's not just getting out there, but it's carefully reflecting and carefully thinking about these kind of things.
Yeah, and I in saying this, I'm also incredibly aware of how Instagram philosophy like it can be. But I just wanted to put that caveat, because I don't like Instagram philosophy, because sometimes it can cheapen something that is really tough. But the gold in that awful experience, those, like, any one of those within themselves could easily be very, like, destabilizing.
Mm-hmm.
Some at best, like a life wobble. But, like, cumulatively, horrid, horrible, terrible shit. Right? There's no way of getting around that. Like, what a terrible set of circumstances. And how much courage it takes to see at the time, and also retrospectively, the little flecks of the invitation to come back to yourself, and then to know who you are, and then be who you are. So when we know who we are, that takes courage. It takes more courage then to be who we are. And that takes, like, moment to moment decisions. Like, I'm showing up on this episode right now in the way that you have, as I am in this moment. And that's always a privilege. Throw in the fact there that you, or the part of your story there, your experience there is like, looking back, probably could have handled it differently, could have sought therapy, could have got some support. I could have opened my mouth.
Mhm.
And of course, like, it's perfectly obvious in hindsight, but also, like, how hard it is at the time to go, things aren't okay. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but these are the events. But also now, how hard it is to talk about it.
Yeah. Sure. That's also why I like to go back from first person to third person as a typical scientist.
It's yeah, there's some linguistic safety there. But yeah, it is always like it is always a privilege. I'll finish that thought. It's a privilege and an honor. And dare I say, a joy to be let in like that, and how wonderfully generous you are to share that. But also, I simply love how you're a human. And yeah, I just, there are many lessons in that shape who you are and how you are. But then also, when it comes to creating connected workplaces,
Yeah. And maybe
having that
there
courage.
to go back from first to third person, and to go back to this kind of the idea of creating connected workplaces. For me, this was a personal issue, but for the organization, it wasn't a personal issue anymore because it really affected how I worked. So it doesn't have to be a personal story. Like we go back to the why of why organizations would do this. Making smart, targeted investments in the well-being of your employees. It wouldn't just have to be about being compassionate. Of course, I needed compassion at that time.
Yeah.
But in that case, you can really foster a more connected, productive, and resilient workplace if you're able to invest in it. So, like we refer to as well, I have one story. Phil, you shared your story many times. We're now talking to our teams about their stories. It will depend on the nature of their loneliness, what kind of help they would need. So you would need to target it differently depending on the individual. But as you do that, you will get a return for investing in your organization. And I think you should actively monitor the social and emotional health of your employees. And that's a way that employees will feel seen, supported. And if you provide them with the resources to help navigate them the challenging time, I think you can reduce the impact of loneliness. It may not go away entirely because people will. So talking about the boundary between personal and professional, there are things that they will need to take care of course, in their personal lives. But at least providing resources in their professional life will help them get back on track. So that's also not only about preventing burnout or turnover, but really the flip side as well, flourishing. Get back to the idea of a chief flourishing officer, enhancing productivity, creativity, job satisfaction. If employees feel more connected and valued, they will be more engaged, they will be more motivated, and they will get back to providing their best work, to go back to social baseline theory and the cost of being alone. Once people are connected, the cost for themselves is lower and they will have more room to flourish within the company. So I think when we support employees as whole people, we can create workplaces where people can really flourish. And it's really a win for everyone, for the individual employee and for the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. And I think on top of that, like, I hope it's really clear that we're very excited about this service. And to pick up on Hans's share there, that took courage. And courage is always inspiring. Like, it is always inspiring. We love it in everybody else. I think as Brene Brown says, vulnerability is amazing when we see it in action from other people, but we think it's a liability in ourselves. Courage is needed to sit with loneliness, to talk about it, to, like, even in the third person to talk about it, but certainly in the first person, it's needed. And so creating connected workplaces is a service that is for organizations who are ready to go there. And I don't think that there's many organizations right now of whatever size who are in business at the moment who say that they're not for innovation, they're not for creativity, they're not for, this is the place where people just kind of work to the beat of a drum and then go home. Like, no organization says that. But creating connected workplaces requires courage. And organizations ready to go there are really going to benefit from this service. There are other services available that may talk about loneliness, talk about social health, talk about all these other, concepts around human connection in the third person and apply very generally. But this is, a point that I made earlier. This is bespoke. This is surgical. This is targeted. This is based on your particular set of circumstances in your organizations for the humans that you want to invest in, who are, doing their best for you. And I don't want to labor the point, but want to say really clearly that, a certain amount of boldness and being uncertain, being okay with the uncertainty of what comes back. And that takes courage to ask the question and not know the answer. But being there for the answer, that takes courage.
And maybe, so I completely agree with what you said, Phil, because it does take courage to take all these different steps if you really want to address this in the first person and not just in the third person as a kind of a theoretical exercise to say we're doing everything we can, but really doing everything one can. But I can also see that people may need some first steps to raising awareness and to really understand, what are the implications of loneliness and social isolation within the workplace, even though I think, you've done this many times in your podcast already. But, you can also choose to just start with, there are different levels in our program, just to start at level 1 and raise awareness so that it opens the discussion. Because like you also said, it can be scary for employees to really reflect truthfully about their loneliness experiences. I'm not sure if I could have done it back in the day as well. So to first at least start the discussion, I think can be a really, really good step.
Yeah. And maybe not even start the discussion, but to start the reflection. And really good point there. Like I think it may have went a bit heavy there on the courage bit, but certainly like it starts at a very high level, talking about loneliness, and raising awareness of loneliness and how it shows up and how it impacts humans and organizations. And then should the organization want to go deeper, then there's level 2, level 3, level 4, which goes to high amounts of specificity and detail. So yeah, thank you, Hans. So Hans, final question. What's your advice to someone who's in the midst of a loneliness experience now?
Oh, I mean, I think I go back also to one of the other points is it does depend on generally on what the cause of your loneliness is, of course, because people go through many different situations. But by and large, the important part is to try to connect with other people, and how you connect with other people will depend. So, if you just lost someone, you probably don't have a rupture in trust in other people. And I think it's important to reconnect with other people to help you through that situation. But if you have situations in which your trust felt violated, for instance, then I think it's a combination also between reflection and reconnecting with other people. So reflection in terms of things can get better. In terms of my own personal story, things can get better. Try to reconnect with other people, and in some cases also to find more professional support. So I don't think I have a very clear answer to it. I'm the ever scientist and will respond, it depends.
That's a very smart answer. Like it does depend. It does depend, and what are the contributing factors to the loneliness experience? Yeah.
And if you have a hostile workplace, it can also be that you need to switch jobs. And then we get back to that it's actually important to provide a hospitable workplace in order to prevent those kind of things.
Yeah. 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 Hans, how can people, like person who's listening to this right now, how can they find out more about the Creating Connected Workplaces service?
So of course there will be a link in your in the podcast, and so I'll do that before you do so. They can also go to our website, so it will be the flyer and the information about the program will be available at our website, which is absl.io. Anthony, Bernard, Simon, Leonard.io, Isaac, Otto. But of course, they can also go to your website, Humans Connecting, where the same information is available. Beyond that, I think you and I would be happily available to take a call with people that are interested in the program. So find us and talk to us.
Yeah, yeah, and that call is important. It's like the opportunity for us to create together with you what you feel could work best for your organization as well. So it's very much sort of co-creating based on your needs as well. Hans, thank you so much for joining us for this final episode of the season. But yeah, how could people find you if they want to if they want to connect more?
Well, first, thank you so much, Phil, because it also offered me some time and space to reflect upon those experiences. And, you know, like you've also said, it's important to reflect about these experiences to move forward, as I heard yesterday. So to get back into your central soul. And in order to find us, so either via our website or one place where I'm also pretty responsive is via LinkedIn. So if people want to connect via LinkedIn, they should feel free to reach out and to talk about loneliness, social connection, and about the experiences that we share.
Yeah, thank you. And again, there'll be links in the show notes for that. Hans, thank you so much for like generously and for your trust in sharing your story. Thank you to the team at ABSL and Humans Connecting for the amazing work that we're doing collaboratively over the last few months. I don't want to say it's work, but it actually feels like it's fun. And you know, creating this service that actually serves from a really good place. Like it's fun. So thank you to you, Hans, and to all our teams for the amazing just bringing themselves. It's amazing. But Hans, thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
Thank you, Phil.
How are you going? Wanted to check in with you after that conversation with Hans. It went so many places, didn't it? But I want to just really say how grateful I am to Hans. I'm recording this the day after that interview, and I'm just so profoundly grateful to Hans for not only sharing his knowledge, his immense knowledge on measurement and data, deliberate pause there, but also like he does this while also being human. And I'm so grateful that he trusted me, that he trusted us with some of his loneliness story, including loneliness as fed and experienced by a former workplace. I checked in with Hans afterwards. And again, this morning when I woke up, and I'm pleased to hear that, and I'm pleased to share that he took good care of himself for the rest of the day, because I introduced him to the concept of the vulnerability hangover, where in sharing something that is so intensely intense, we can after a little while be consumed by these thoughts and feelings like, why did I say this? I should have said this. I should have said that. And, oh no, what will people think? And really kind of be in this shame spiral. And not only are we in this shame spiral, but physically, we can get headaches, we can feel exhausted and just kind of generally unwell. And so I told Hans about the vulnerability hangover, and I was just really pleased. And I wanted to share this with you, listener and viewer, that in sharing these stories of loneliness, it does take courage, and it takes courage to sit with it. But when we do, we like the burden that we've been carrying within us feels lighter. And but that kind of the effort that it takes and the energy that it takes to share what has been held within, well, it is very normal. It is very normal to have that kind of vulnerability hangover. So Hans did take care of himself, I was pleased to see. Now, in terms of the rest of that episode, the rest of that conversation, it's easy to see why me and the team at Humans Connecting are just so excited to collaborate with ABSL, Hans and his team, to help transform your workplace, which may be experiencing loneliness in a really kind of obvious way. You might be very aware of it, or you may be completely unaware of how 25% on average 25% of the humans in your workplace are carrying around the burden of thoughts and feelings of loneliness that may or may not be fed by the workplace, but it's absolutely impacting on them as humans and on the productivity and efficiency in the workplace. So really happy to share all the details of the Creating Connected Workplaces program service with you. And of course, we're right here when you've got questions and you want to explore it further. So that's it for this episode and for season 2 of the Humans Connecting podcast. And what season it has been. It feels like it just went by in the blink of an eye, these past 10 episodes. But before we wrap this up, I want to say a profound thank you on behalf of me and the team at Humans Connecting to our wonderful guests who appeared in episodes through this season. So in order of appearance, we want to thank Dr. Miriam Kermeyer for sharing her expertise on friendship and how you and I can make friends, particularly as an adult. I want to say thank you to Alicia Casanyas from Friends for Good for telling us about how Friends for Good want to help us not experience loneliness and to pass through loneliness through the services provided by Friends for Good. I want to say thank you to our very own sales manager here, Jack Hedges, for sharing some of his experience of loneliness and what he's been learning about human connection through working here at Humans Connecting. I want to say thank you to Jacob Darkin, sharing his experience of connection after a spinal injury left him in a wheelchair and having spent in recovering 9 months. Spending 9 months recovering in hospital. There we go. I got it out. Spending 9 months recovering in the spinal unit of Royal North Shore Hospital and the insights and wisdom that he got from that life-changing incident. I want to say thank you to Chai Bade for telling us about mindfulness and how that has helped him move through loneliness and how his loneliness helped him create the Bunch Up, which is a service that he's creating to help other humans connect. And so his loneliness and his experience of loneliness has been turned into opportunities to help you connect. It's wonderful, that episode. We also want to say thank you to Christine Young, our friend from Weaver, who in episode 19, so in the second last episode of the season, talked about how we can escape our golden handcuffs, which particularly when we get to a certain stage in life, like midlife, and we want to make a career change or any other kind of change, we can feel like we've painted ourselves into a corner and we cannot make change without potentially making a big mess and upsetting relationships, families, our and the people around us, and without risking all sorts of uncertainty. So if you missed any of those episodes, go back. There's so many great things and tips and insights, all designed to help you where you are and how you are right now take steps to becoming a connected human. So we are already planning season 3. We've got some great guests lined up for season 3, but now's a great time. If you've got any ideas for content that you want to hear on the Humans Connecting podcast, reach out to us. And indeed, if you've got any feedback, any comments, suggestions, all the kind of things, you know how commenting works on social media. You know how it works via email. We simply love to hear from you, particularly if you've got ideas, because this is your podcast to help you become a connected human. And finally, we are, as mentioned in the intro, we are a social enterprise, and we are absolutely committed to making a positive social impact. So if you are an organization, if you are a social enterprise who also absolutely committed to making a positive social impact, reach out to us. Let's see how we can collaborate and work together to help humans feel more connected. There's a link in the show notes that helps you, it's the first step to booking a call with me, and let's strategize, let's plot and plan ways of really changing the world. My friend, thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with us on this final episode of season 2. We can't wait to see you in season 3. And until then, take care of yourself. Feed connection by choosing connection. Every time you think about it, choose connection. You can't go wrong. And until next time, take care, and we'll see you later.